My fiancé's parents tried to ruin me before the wedding. Hired a PI to dig dirt, then paid him to fake it when he found nothing. Too bad the PI was my old army buddy. He sent me everything: the fake report, the real one, and their bribe on tape. Guess what played during the rehearsal dinner slideshow? I, 32M, thought I had won the lottery when she said yes. We met at a charity fundraiser 2 years ago, hit it off immediately, and after 18 months of what I believed was a genuine connection, I proposed on a beach in Maui. She cried. I cried. Her friends cried when she posted the ring photos. Everything seemed perfect until 3 months before the wedding, when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in 8 years. The text was simple: need to talk. Urgent. Same coffee shop. It was from Marcus, my old platoon buddy from my army days. We'd served 2 tours together in Afghanistan, the kind of experience that bonds you for life even when you drift apart afterward. I hadn't spoken to him since his wedding 5 years ago, so urgent meant urgent. I met him the next morning at a small cafe downtown, away from my usual spots. Marcus looked uncomfortable, constantly glancing at his phone and the door. He slid a manila envelope across the table before I even ordered coffee. He told me he'd been hired as a private investigator 4 weeks ago by my future in-laws to dig up dirt on me. The job was straightforward: find anything that would convince their daughter I wasn't marriage material. Criminal history, secret families, financial problems, affairs, addiction, bankruptcy, anything. My stomach dropped. I asked him what he found, though part of me already knew. Marcus said he found nothing because there was nothing to find. I'd been exactly who I claimed to be: an IT security consultant with a clean record, stable income, no debts beyond my mortgage, no criminal history, not even a DUI. He ran every database, interviewed people from my past, checked my financial records through his contacts. I was, in his words, annoyingly clean. That's when things got interesting. Marcus explained that when he delivered his preliminary findings to her parents, they weren't satisfied. Her father specifically told him that wasn't good enough, that there had to be something. 2 weeks later, her mother called Marcus to a meeting at their estate. She sat him down in their study and made him an offer: $25,000 to fabricate a report showing I had a gambling addiction, mounting debts, and a pattern of lying to cover it up. Marcus told me he pretended to consider it, asked for details about what they wanted included, then said he needed a week to put it together properly. What they didn't know was that Marcus had started recording conversations the moment they pushed back on his clean findings. He had everything: the initial contract, his real investigation report, their rejection of the truth, and the conversation where they offered him money to lie. He recorded the follow-up calls too, where her mother specified exact casinos I'd supposedly frequented and amounts I'd supposedly lost. I sat there staring at the envelope, my coffee growing cold. Marcus asked what I wanted to do. He said he could walk away, tell them the deal was off, return their money for the fake report, and I could confront my fiancée privately. Or he could give me everything and let me handle it however I wanted. He'd already decided he wasn't taking their money either way, but he thought I deserved to know who I was marrying into. I opened the envelope right there. Inside was Marcus's real investigation report, professionally bound and thorough. It detailed every aspect of my life he'd checked: employment verification, financial records, interviews with former colleagues and friends, rental history, credit report, criminal background check, everything. The conclusion stated I was a low-risk individual with strong character references and stable lifestyle. Clipped to it was a second document: the fabricated report her parents had requested. This one painted me as a degenerate gambler who'd maxed out credit cards at various casinos, borrowed money from loan sharks, and lied repeatedly about my whereabouts. It included falsified bank statements, fake casino receipts, even manufactured text message screenshots. But the most damning evidence was the flash drive. Marcus had labeled it clearly: audio recordings, conversations with subjects, dates, and times logged. I didn't listen to it there, but Marcus gave me the highlights. Her father's voice clearly stating they needed something to break us up. Her mother detailing exactly what story would be most convincing. A follow-up call where they discussed how to present it to their daughter for maximum impact. I asked Marcus why he was doing this, risking his reputation and business. He reminded me about Kandahar, about the firefight where I dragged him to cover after he took shrapnel to his leg. He said he owed me his life, and there was no way he was going to let these people destroy mine with lies. Besides, he said, His job was finding the truth, not manufacturing convenient fictions for rich people who couldn't accept reality. The wedding was 6 weeks away. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for 5 weeks from that coffee meeting. I had decisions to make, but first I needed to know if my fiancée was involved. That night, I went home and acted completely normal. She was excited about centerpiece options and whether we should do a chocolate fountain. I smiled and nodded and felt sick. Over the next week, I paid attention differently. I noticed how often her parents called, how she'd sometimes step into another room for conversations. I wondered if she knew, if she was in on it, or if they were planning to ambush her with the fake evidence too. I couldn't bring myself to ask directly because if she was innocent, I'd be putting her in an impossible position. If she was guilty, I'd be tipping my hand. 2 weeks after meeting Marcus, her mother invited me to lunch. Just the two of us, she said, to discuss some wedding logistics. I accepted, recording device in my pocket, courtesy of Marcus who'd loaned me professional equipment. We met at an upscale bistro near her office. She made small talk for 20 minutes before pivoting to how expensive the wedding was becoming, how she and her husband were contributing so much, how they just wanted to make sure their daughter was taken care of. Then she asked me about my finances. Specifically, she asked if I had any debts I hadn't disclosed. I told her no, everything was clean. She pressed, asking about credit cards, loans, anything I might be embarrassed about. I maintained my innocence. She sat back, studied me, then said something about how marriage was built on trust and honesty, and wouldn't it be better to come clean now rather than have secrets exposed later. I realized she was fishing, trying to get me to confess to something, anything, that they could then magnify. When I didn't bite, she excused herself to the restroom. I checked my recording device, made sure it was capturing everything, and waited. When she returned, she'd changed tactics entirely, suddenly warm and cheerful again, talking about what a wonderful son-in-law I'd make. The rehearsal dinner was 3 weeks away when I made my decision. I spent those weeks meticulously planning with Marcus's help. He knew a guy who could handle the technical aspects. I told my fiancée I wanted to put together a slideshow for the rehearsal dinner, photos of us, our journey, something sentimental. She loved the idea. Her parents loved the idea. Everyone loved the idea. I spent hours selecting photos, writing captions, choosing music. The slideshow was genuinely good, a real chronological journey of our relationship. I showed my fiancée a draft, and she cried happy tears. I showed her parents a version too, when they asked to preview it. They approved enthusiastically. What none of them knew was that I had 2 versions saved, the real one and the one that would actually play. The rehearsal dinner was at an expensive country club her parents belonged to. 75 guests, mostly their friends and family, some of my people scattered throughout. The room was elegant, the food was catered, the bar was open. Everyone was in high spirits. I played the perfect groom-to-be, charming and gracious, thanking her parents publicly for their generosity and support. After dinner, before dessert, the lights dimmed for the slideshow. I stood up, gave a short speech about love and family and gratitude. I specifically thanked her parents for welcoming me so warmly into their family, for treating me like a son. Her mother dabbed her eyes. Her father nodded approvingly. I sat down, took my fiancé's hand, and the screen lit up. The first few slides were exactly as promised. Photos of us at the fundraiser where we met. Our first vacation. Holidays with both families. People smiled and murmured appreciatively. Then, about 2 minutes in, the photos stopped. The screen went black for a beat before text appeared. A story about trust. Marcus's real investigation report filled the screen, page by page, slow enough to read. Professional formatting, official letterhead, dated findings. Guests started murmuring, confused. My fiancée squeezed my hand, whispering what was this. Her parents had gone rigid in their seats. The report scrolled through every aspect of Marcus's investigation, showing clearly that he'd found nothing problematic. Character references from my former army buddies. Financial records showing stability. Clean background checks. Everything concluded I was exactly who I claimed to be. Then came the fabricated report. Side-by-side comparison, same formatting, same letterhead, but wildly different conclusions. Fake gambling debts. Manufactured casino visits. Falsified financial documents. The room went completely silent. People were leaning forward, reading, trying to understand. My fiancée had dropped my hand. She was staring at the screen, then at her parents. The audio started playing. Her father's voice, crystal clear through the country club sound system, discussing how they needed something to stop the wedding. Her mother's voice detailing what lies would be most effective. The conversation about paying Marcus $25,000 to manufacture evidence. Every word was audible. Every damning detail was captured. I didn't look at the screen. I watched the room. My fiancée had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her father had stood up, face purple, trying to say something, but the audio kept playing. Her mother was frozen, staring at the screen like she could make it stop through force of will. My family and friends looked shocked, but also grimly satisfied, like pieces were finally falling into place. When the audio ended, the screen showed one final message. Marcus Thompson, licensed private investigator, refused the bribe and reported these findings to the subject of investigation. This presentation contains unaltered evidence of attempted character assassination and conspiracy to defraud. Then it faded to black. The lights came up slowly. Nobody moved. The silence was suffocating. Then her father exploded, shouting that this was a lie, a setup, that I'd manufactured everything to embarrass them. He was pointing at me, his face contorted with rage. Other guests started standing, some trying to calm him, others backing away from the scene. My fiancée turned to me, her face destroyed, and asked if this was real. I told her everything was real. Every recording, every document, every word. I explained how Marcus contacted me, what her parents tried to do, how they wanted to destroy my reputation to stop our marriage. She looked at her parents, asked them if it was true. Her mother tried to salvage it, claiming they were just being protective, that they'd heard rumors, that they had to be sure. Her father was still shouting, but his words were becoming less coherent. Several guests were already leaving. My best man had moved to stand beside me, creating a physical barrier. The country club manager appeared, clearly distressed by the chaos. My fiancée stood up slowly, removed her engagement ring, and placed it on the table in front of me. She said she couldn't do this, couldn't marry into this situation, couldn't reconcile what she'd just learned. She was crying, barely able to speak. She told me she didn't know, that she'd had no idea what her parents were planning. She said she loved me, but she couldn't choose between me and her family, and since they'd forced that choice, there was no wedding. I told her I believed she didn't know. I also told her that her choice not to choose was itself a choice. I stood up, pocketed the ring, and thanked the remaining guests for coming. I specifically thanked Marcus, who was sitting in the back with his wife, for his integrity and friendship. Then I left. The fallout was immediate and extensive. By the next morning, half the wedding guests had called me. Most offered support. A few accused me of being cruel, of choosing public humiliation over private resolution. I understood their perspective, but they hadn't been in my position. Her parents had tried to systematically destroy my reputation with manufactured evidence. They'd been willing to pay substantial money to ruin my life. A private conversation would have led to denial, deflection, and probably a continued campaign against me through other means. My fiancée called 3 days later. She'd moved out of her parents' house temporarily, staying with friends. She said her family was imploding. Her father was facing questions from his business partners about his character and judgment. Her mother had resigned from 2 charity boards after other members requested she step down. Extended family members were taking sides. She was angry at me for how I'd handled it, angry at her parents for what they'd done, angry at the whole situation. I asked if she'd known the truth, would she have believed me or them? She went quiet for a long time before admitting she didn't know. That answer told me everything. The wedding was canceled officially. Deposits were lost. Gifts were returned. Our shared apartment lease was broken. We divided our stuff efficiently, no drama, just sadness. Marcus called a week after the rehearsal dinner disaster. He told me her father had tried to sue him for breach of contract and invasion of privacy. Marcus's lawyer had laughed at the filing, sent over copies of all the recordings and documentation, and reminded her father that attempting to suborn perjury was a crime. The lawsuit was quietly withdrawn. Marcus said he'd never seen someone backpedal so fast when confronted with their own recorded words. Update 1. 3 months after the canceled wedding, I was doing surprisingly well. Therapy helped. My job was going strong, actually got a promotion. Friends had rallied around me. I'd started running again, something I'd let slip during wedding planning. Life was moving forward. Then I got a call from an unknown number. It was my ex-fiancee's younger sister. We'd gotten along well during the relationship, and she'd been one of the few family members who'd reached out after everything imploded to apologize. She asked to meet for coffee. Something in her voice made me agree. She told me the family was completely fractured. Her parents' marriage was hanging by a thread. Her father had become paranoid, convinced that other business associates were investigating him. Her mother had developed anxiety issues and rarely left the house. My ex-fiancée had moved across the country for a job opportunity, partially to escape the aftermath. But that wasn't why she wanted to meet. She explained that their parents had done this before. Not the PI scheme specifically, but sabotaging relationships they didn't approve of. Her older brother, who I'd met only twice, had been engaged 8 years ago. That relationship had also fallen apart mysteriously right before the wedding. The girl had accused him of cheating based on evidence that appeared suddenly. He'd maintained his innocence, but the damage was done. The relationship ended. Her brother never talked about it, but he'd never seriously dated anyone since. She said after my rehearsal dinner revelation, she'd confronted her parents about that previous incident. After hours of pressure, her mother had finally admitted they'd orchestrated that breakup too. Different method, same goal. They'd hired someone to seduce her brother's fiancée at a bar, take compromising photos, then send them to her brother. The girl had been drunk and didn't remember clearly, but the photos existed. Her brother, devastated and confused, had ended things. I felt sick listening to this. These people had systematically destroyed their own children's relationships based on nothing but their own control issues and prejudices. I asked what made someone unworthy for their family. She said it was arbitrary and capricious. Her brother's fiancée had been wrong because she came from a working-class background. I was wrong because I didn't come from old money. They had a specific vision of who their children should marry, and anyone outside that vision was a threat to be eliminated. She was telling me this, she said, because her brother deserved to know the truth. But he'd never believe it coming from her. He'd dismissed her questions, too traumatized to revisit that time. However, if I reached out, if I shared my experience and evidence, maybe together we could break through his denial. She gave me his contact information and asked me to consider it. I thought about it for 2 days. This wasn't my fight anymore. I'd moved on. But I also remembered the look on my ex-fiancée's face when she'd asked if it was real, the devastation of learning your parents had betrayed you. Her brother deserved that truth, even if it came 8 years late. I called him. He was defensive immediately, clearly warned by his sister that I might reach out. I didn't push. I just told him I had information about my own situation that might be relevant to his past, and if he ever wanted to talk, I'd make myself available. Then I let it go. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked tired and older than his years. He asked to hear everything. I showed him everything. Marcus's reports, the recordings, the whole documentation package I'd assembled. Then I told him what his sister had shared about his own broken engagement. He sat on my couch staring at nothing for probably 20 minutes. Then he told me his story. His fiancée had been a kindergarten teacher, sweet and genuine, from a family of school teachers and firefighters. His parents had smiled to her face while making small comments to him about ambition and social standing. 2 months before their wedding, the photos appeared. His fiancée at a bar, clearly drunk, with a man who wasn't him. The man's hands on her. Her laughing. More photos showing them leaving together. She'd sworn nothing happened, that she didn't remember most of that night, that she'd been drugged or something because she'd only had 2 drinks. But the photos existed. He'd believed the evidence over her protests. The wedding was canceled. She'd moved away. He'd spent 8 years believing she'd betrayed him. Now he was realizing his parents had orchestrated everything. The man in the photos had probably been hired. The drinks had probably been spiked to make her vulnerable. The photos had been staged and timed perfectly to create maximum damage. His parents had destroyed a genuine relationship because they deemed his fiancée insufficiently prestigious. He asked if I knew where she was now. I didn't, but I told him if he wanted help finding her, I knew a very good private investigator who owed me a favor. Update 2. Marcus found her in 4 days. She was living 2 states over, working as an elementary school principal, married with 2 kids. Her social media was private, but basic public records gave us enough. The question was whether reaching out would help or cause more harm. Her brother agonized over this decision for weeks. Eventually, he wrote a letter, not asking for anything, not trying to restart anything, just apologizing and explaining what he'd learned. He included copies of my evidence, drawing parallels to his own situation. He sent it certified mail so he'd know she received it, then waited. She called him 6 weeks later. They talked for 3 hours. She told him she'd spent years in therapy working through that trauma, convinced she'd somehow failed herself that night, even though she couldn't remember it. The realization that she'd been targeted, drugged, and photographed deliberately had recontextualized everything. She was angry, but also relieved to finally understand what had happened. Her husband knew the whole story, and she told my ex's brother that while she appreciated the truth, her life had moved on. She was happy now. She hoped he could find happiness too. She also hoped his parents faced consequences for what they'd done. That conversation was exactly what he needed. Not reconciliation, but clarity. He scheduled a meeting with his parents, brought me along as a witness, and confronted them with everything. His father tried the same bluster that had failed at my rehearsal dinner. His mother cried and claimed they'd only wanted what was best for their children. He told them they destroyed 2 relationships and damaged 3 lives because of their own prejudices and control issues. He said he was done with them until they acknowledged what they'd done and got serious help. Then we left. I thought that was the end of my involvement. I'd helped right a wrong, exposed a pattern of abuse, and could move forward clean. But 3 months after that confrontation, I got another unexpected call. It was my ex-fiancée. She was back in town temporarily, helping her sister with something. She asked if we could meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. She looked different, lighter somehow, despite everything. She thanked me first for exposing her parents' behavior. She said learning the truth had been devastating but necessary. She'd spent months in therapy unpacking her family dynamics and realized how much of her life had been controlled and manipulated. Then she apologized, not for breaking off the engagement, but for not immediately standing with me when the truth came out. She said fear and conditioning had made her freeze, made her unable to choose, and that cowardice had cost her someone genuine. She wasn't asking to get back together. She just wanted me to know she understood now what I'd been dealing with, and she was sorry she hadn't been strong enough to fight it with me. I told her I appreciated the apology, but we'd both moved on. I asked if she'd found what she was looking for. She said she was still figuring that out, but at least now she was making her own choices instead of living within parameters set by people who claimed to love her but really just wanted control. We talked for another hour, filling in gaps, sharing what we'd learned. It was bittersweet but necessary. When we parted ways, it felt final in a healthy way. No lingering resentment, no what-ifs, just 2 people who'd survived something toxic and were trying to build better lives. The real end came 4 months later when I got a wedding invitation. Not from my ex, but from her brother. He'd started dating someone new, a woman he'd met through work who had no connection to his family's social circle. His parents weren't invited to the wedding. His sister was his best woman. The invitation included a note thanking me for helping him reclaim his life and asking if I'd attend as his friend. I went to that wedding. It was small, genuine, filled with people who actually cared about the couple rather than social positioning. During his toast, he mentioned that some families are born and some are chosen, and he was grateful to have found people who valued truth over appearance. He didn't mention the specifics, but everyone in that room knew the story. Marcus was there too, with his wife. We stood in the back, watching someone get their happy ending despite everything working against them. He asked if I'd started dating again. I told him I was taking my time, being more careful, paying attention to red flags. He laughed and said that was the healthiest thing he'd heard in months. 6 months after that wedding, I ran into my ex-fiancée one more time, completely by accident, at a bookstore downtown. She was with someone, a guy who seemed genuinely kind based on the brief interaction. She looked happy. We exchanged pleasantries, nothing deep, and went our separate ways. That chance encounter gave me something I didn't know I needed. Confirmation that the decision I'd made at that rehearsal dinner, as brutal and public as it was, had actually freed multiple people from a toxic cycle. Her brother found love and truth. She found independence and self-awareness. I found clarity and strength I didn't know I had. People still ask if I regret how I handled it, if public exposure was necessary. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain it caused genuine people caught in the crossfire. But I don't regret exposing deliberate cruelty masquerading as protection. Some things need to be brought into the light, not for revenge, but for accountability. Her parents faced social consequences for their actions, They lost relationships with their children. They had to confront what they'd done. Whether they learned from it, I'll never know. I've had no contact with them since that night. But I know their children are building better lives, making choices based on authentic feelings rather than manufactured evidence and parental manipulation. That matters more than any wedding that never happened. I still keep Marcus's evidence package in a secure location. Not because I think I'll need it, but as a reminder. A reminder that truth matters, that integrity matters, that the people who claim to love you should prove it through support, not sabotage. And that sometimes the hardest thing to do and the right thing to do are exactly the same thing. Life moved forward. I eventually started dating again, with much better boundaries and clearer expectations about family dynamics. I advanced in my career. I maintained my friendship with Marcus, whose business actually grew after word spread about his integrity. I stayed in touch with my ex's siblings, who were rebuilding their lives outside their parents' control. The story of the rehearsal dinner became something of a legend in certain circles. I've had 3 different people reach out over the past year asking if I'd share my evidence for their own situations involving manipulative in-laws. I've helped where I could, always emphasizing documentation and truth over revenge. Looking back now, 2 years after that rehearsal dinner, I can see how that one decision changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone trapped in that family's web of control. Sometimes exposing darkness is the only way to find light. Sometimes burning down what's broken is the only way to build something better. And sometimes the person who ruins your wedding is actually the person who saves your life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.